People can decide whether or not to trust you in the first 7 seconds of meeting you before you even say a single word. How, you may ask? Well, the answer is quite simple. It's all dependent on your body language. And so, my goal in today's video is to simply prepare you for those 7 seconds that you may encounter with your judges, audience, or anybody else you might want to impress with your own speaking skills. And so, tag along as we actually dive into the importance of body language, not only in speaking, but also in daily day-to-day life. But first, before we talk about how you can fix your own body language, let's first talk about why body language actually matters. Well, to put it simply, body language is one of the biggest factors in determining how people perceive your speeches. A big misconception is that speeches are solely based off of content. But most research, as shown here, would actually show that speeches are primarily based on things like the way you act, how you sound, and also the way that you convey yourself through things like hand gestures and other types of body language. And that's why it's important to have body language and hand gestures as well as have a good tone. That way you're actually guiding your audience through your speech and making you sound credible and persuasive. Now, this isn't just a debate thing. You could also cross-apply this to different presentations or maybe a lecture where you want to guide your audience or guide your students through your presentation or through your lecture, so that way they understand it better and that way they're constantly engaged with your presentation rather than simply bored out of their mind, just kind of tuning in every now and then to see if there's anything important to listen to. Now, the first type of body language we'll talk about is eye contact. This is one of the single most important tools that you can use to build trust with your audience or with your judge in a debate round. The problem with most speakers nowadays is that they look at their notes, they look at their laptops, or they look at their presentation and slides rather than actually looking at the audience or whoever they're presenting to. And that's a big issue, because if you're never looking at the person who you're actually talking to, then how can you ever expect them to look back at you if you're not even looking back at them? And so, I have one simple trick that can fix this problem easily, and it's called the 3-second rule. All you're going to do is look at the person or the audience who you're presenting to for 3 seconds with direct eye contact. If it's just one person, you can look at them directly, eye to eye. If it's an audience, make sure that you're scanning around to different people, the audience, and looking at them directly, eye to eye as well. You don't necessarily have to look at everybody, but try your best to look at as many people as you can. This way, you're not only helping engage certain sections of the crowd or engaging certain people in the crowd, but you're also helping to maintain direct eye contact and engagement with whoever you're presenting to. Now, the other mistake that people make is making eye contact for too long. While you do want to sound like you're direct and you do want to make people engaged, you also don't want to look like a creep or a little weird by looking at them for longer than 3 seconds. So, as long as you don't go over 3 or so seconds, you should be fine. But make sure, specifically, that you hit that sweet spot of 3 seconds, or else you might completely lose all your credibility and seem pretty weird to your audience or the person you're presenting to. The next type of body language we'll talk about is posture. Now, one of the most important things about the way that you speak is your posture. And having a bad posture can really hinder your ability to not only seem confident, engaging, but also hinder your ability to seem authoritative. And so let me give an example. Imagine I was always speaking to you like this, where I'm sitting down, I'm just kind of slouching on my couch, and I'm just talking like this. Whereas if I talk the way I normally do, with my posture up and my shoulders rolled back a little bit, so that way I seem like I'm engaged and that I do actually care about what I'm talking about. That's a huge difference. It not only makes me seem more credible when I'm standing upright, but it also makes me seem like I really know what I'm talking about, even if I'm not necessarily talking about anything too great. But what's also important to note is that you should not only be focused on how you're standing upright, but you should also be focused on what the rest of your body's doing, specifically your lower half. Your feet should be at least shoulder width apart, so that way you give off a power stance. And your shoulders, as I kind of mentioned earlier, should be rolled back, along with your chin being up, so that way you seem confident and you're not talking down here, sort of kind of fidgeting with your hands and seeming unconfident by looking down. This way, with your power stance in mind, and by looking directly at the audience, you can not only create this idea that you have credibility, but you can also create this idea that you're trustworthy and that you are a leader, which is very important in terms of speaking. Now, another thing to note is that you should always avoid fidgeting. Fidgeting like this with your hands, or maybe just having them behind your back and kind of moving them, or swaying your body a little bit, will always hurt you because it's distracting from your actual speech and content. Rather, you should always try and maintain the zero pose whenever you're not actually using hand gestures. And what I mean by zero pose could be something like having your hands clasped together and in front of you while you're speaking. Or they could just simply be at your side, and you could just be simply talking without using any hand gestures. Now, it's also important to note that you shouldn't be constantly in your zero position. You should have hand gestures every now and then. You should be moving your hands to what feels natural for you. Of course, a lot of people like myself struggle with hand gestures, and so I tend to use them a little less, and other people do as well. That's not necessarily a bad thing. That's just the way that you're used to speaking and the style of how you actually present yourself. So still, even if you may not necessarily have the best hand gestures, you should still try to incorporate them as much as you can, so that way you keep your audience constantly engaged. Oh, and one more thing. Just because you're short doesn't mean that you get out of having a bad posture. In fact, if you're short, you should really be focusing on having a good posture. Because I, for example, am very short, but if I have a bad posture, it really makes me look like I do not want to be there and that I'm very lazy. But if I have a good posture, then my judge who's in my debate round, or my audience who's standing in front of me, can at least see that I'm doing my very best and that I've put a lot of effort into what I'm doing. So make sure that you actually put in the effort to look credible and to improve your posture. Something that's not necessarily a body language style, but is still very important to note, is your nervous habits that you have while speaking. Everybody has them, myself included, and whenever I speak specifically, I tend to sway a lot, or I tend to fidget with my hands. And so this ties back into posture, because you can fix these simple things that is common amongst almost everybody by simply grounding yourself using the power stance we talked about earlier, or by using the zero position with your hands clasped to make sure that you prevent yourself from fidgeting with your hands while speaking, which not only hurts you and your credibility, but also distracts your audience and makes them less engaged. As I touched on earlier, it's important to make sure that you're not distracting your audience with anything else, because it really takes away from the content that you're talking about. And if your audience isn't focused on your content, then they're not focused on anything important overall, since your content is basically the entire body of your speech. And so, as I talked about earlier, that's why we want to guide the audience through the speech, why we want to lead them into the speech, because it allows them to not only keep being engaged, but also receive the content that's being presented to them. And so you can kind of see how all this ties back in. If you learn one thing and you learn another thing, you can use it to solve back for other problems that you may have while speaking. And that's why we talk about these basics, because they not only help you solve your nervous habits, but they also help you signal more credibility and build up engagement with your audience. And that's why things like speaking, although maybe seem arbitrary to a lot of people, are very important if you're going to a debate round, or you're trying to give a presentation, or just giving a lecture or a small classroom slideshow presentation to your classmates. They can really help you not only get better grades on these presentations, but also do better in debate competitions and tournaments down the road. Now, here's a quick way that you can practice these skills that we've learned. All you have to do is utilize the mirror technique, as we're going to call it. The technique is simple. All you have to do is have a mirror in front of you and simply talk for about a minute. While you're doing the activity, you're going to make sure that you're actually paying attention to your gestures, the way you talk, how you sound, etc. And you're going to note all these things down and figure out ways to solve them using methods that we talked about in this video. Now, another way that you can level up this activity if you don't have a mirror, or if you want a better way of actually figuring out what you did wrong, is by simply recording yourself talking into your phone for about a minute and then replaying the video to see what you did wrong. Then, once you note everything that you did wrong, you can simply correct all those things and then figure out how to better your speaking as a whole. Do it a couple times until you figure it out properly, and then finally, once you have the perfect speech, or you have a speech that's at least to your liking, then you can put your phone down and be proud of yourself. But yeah, that's about it for today's video. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you continue with the series as we continue to release more videos, helping you find your voice, improve your speaking skills, and introducing you to different debate events and debating skills. This is all for now. My name is Vivaan Sadare, and please like and subscribe to this channel so that we can spread the word to more people and give people the advice they need. Peace.